Lake Clark is a gigantic national park in southern Alaska that comprises over 4 million acres. The park is difficult to visit with no roads and limited services when you arrive, but it is well worth the effort. I surprised my mom with a full-day adventure where we flew in a float plane from Anchorage, landed at the stunning Crescent Lake, and spent the whole day cruising on a pontoon boat while searching for bears. Here is all the information on our visit to Lake Clark, and be sure to watch to the end as we see a lot of bears in this video. Alright, let's jump into it. The adventure began by heading to the world's busiest float plane base, which is right outside of the Anchorage airport. Hey everybody, I'm here with my mom, and today I'm going to my second to last Alaska National Park, Lake Clark, and we're going on a bear viewing adventure.
And I can't wait, I'm so excited. Bucket list.
This float plane base is just a cool place to check out, as you see float planes taking off every 5 to 10 minutes depending on how busy it is. After checking in, we were ushered over to the 6-seater Beaver float plane, which is what we were taking for this adventure. I flew in basically every type of bush plane while I was visiting these Alaska national parks, and this one was relatively small for me, but I still fit pretty good. The only problem on this one was the height of the plane, and it was right about at my height, so if you're any taller than 6'3", you might not fit too well. On the way back, I flew up with the pilot though, and that had a lot more room. Getting to take off from the world's most active seaplane base was cool in and of itself, and we flew right over the international airport, and it was wild to see commercial airlines below you. The flight from Anchorage was about an hour and 10 minutes, with most of that going over the Cook Inlet on your way to the national park. These bear viewing flights usually only run at the very end of July through August to early September. So if you want to do it, you should book in advance as they fill up quickly since the time period is so limited. The pilot gave us lots of information as we were flying across, and you could push a button to talk to him if you had any questions. Once we crossed over the water, the views got exponentially better with massive mountain ranges and even valleys that we were actually flying through. Much like in the Wrangell St. Elias video, you really need to be able to get above a park this big in order to have any appreciation for it. I was so excited we were able to see it in this way, and I would love to spend more time flying around and just experiencing more of the park. Eventually we crossed over a range and were greeted with the stunning turquoise blue of Crescent Lake as our pilot took the plane down and landed it on the water. We landed at Redoubt Mountain Lodge, which is a luxury accommodation inside of the national park, only accessible via float plane. We have arrived at Lake Clark National Park. That's Crescent Lake behind us. When we arrived at the lodge, we were given a safety briefing, options to use the bathroom, and then our float plane actually left to go run some more people somewhere else in Alaska, and we were there for the rest of the day to explore Lake Clark.
Ready to see some bears?
Yes, I am.
Almost immediately, our small group of 7 people was ushered onto a pontoon boat with our guide, and we set out to explore the lake. Basically, the way this tour works is that we spend a couple hours on the lake, stop for lunch, and then spend another 3 to 4 hours on the lake in the afternoon, the entire time searching for bears. Our guide had been at this lodge for multiple summers and was great at seeing bears, and almost immediately we raced across the lake to see our first one. It was all downhill from here as the bear just walked along the coastline for 15 minutes and even stood up for us. She said that seeing a bear stand up like this is incredibly rare. And then if standing up wasn't enough, the bear walked out in the water and the guide was able to get us this incredible shot. After our super eventful first 30 minutes, we just set out to cruise around the lake a little bit more, watched the float planes land, and kept our eyes peeled for more bears. As we headed to the southern portion of the lake, we saw 2 bears sitting right next to each other. Our guide told us that these were probably young bears returning for the first time without their mom. She said that probably by next year they wouldn't want to be anywhere near each other. The best part about this tour is the focus is just on seeing the bears in their natural habitat. Whenever we would find a bear, we'd basically stay for as long as everybody wanted to watch them. Plus, the bears are used to the boats, and we are far enough away that it never impacted what they were doing, and it was cool to just be able to see them going about their day and doing the things that they would normally do if humans weren't there. When you compare this to something like Katmai, the entire experience was just so much more relaxing here. Katmai is absolutely the best place I've ever seen wildlife in a national park, but there's something about just being able to sit in the boat and cruise around and look for bears and then just sit and watch them. There was almost no physical effort, and I have to say, after a month in Alaska, it was nice to just sit and soak it all in. So we are heading up to have some lunch. We saw about 6 bears this morning, gonna eat and then go back out and see how many more we can see. But look at how incredible this area is. I'm blown away. Here's our restaurant for today. Fresh caught salmon lunch. The tour that we did included a lunch which was cooked by another one of the lodge workers while we were on the boat. They had actually caught the salmon the night before, so it was about as fresh as it could get, and they baked fresh chocolate chip cookies. All right, after our salmon lunch, we're heading back on the water, hopefully to see more bears. After our relaxing lunch at the lodge, we headed back out in the boat for 4 more hours of cruising around looking for bears. Again, we saw them immediately and were able to watch them interact with each other and even a few chasing each other off for the best spot. We were a little early in the season and there wasn't a ton of salmon available for them, so we didn't really get to see them eating too much. Mostly they were just enjoying the water, walking along the beach, and eating some of the plants. There were a couple that we saw actually eating salmon, but most often that was just the leftover scraps that the fishermen left on the beach. And our guide told us that had become an issue where the bears are just used to getting the scraps instead of catching the fish themselves. As we continued to cruise the lake, we traded bears for views for a little bit. We got to see glaciers on the surrounding mountains and even a massive volcano that sits behind the lodge. Then we also got to see a bald eagle that was just perched at the top of a tree. While it seems like there's a ton of stuff happening in this video, it could be 20 to 30 minutes between each of these sightings. Our guide let us know how lucky we were to be able to have this amazing weather. She said that sometimes you can't even see across the lake because it's so foggy, and we could see across the entire lake and up to the mountains behind it. She suggested that since the weather was so good, we should cruise all the way to the end of the lake, see if there's any bears, but also just take in a lot of the views. Of course we were up for this. I mean, look at these views. There's waterfalls, there's peaks, there's glaciers. It's pretty hard to beat. We didn't see any bears in this section, but the landscape was blowing us away and nobody really missed them. Also, I asked our guide if she ever doesn't see bears, and she said she's only been skunked once over the 6 years she's worked there. So we got to get off on the other side of the lake for a few minutes just to look around, see if we could see some bears. But I mean, look at this water. Doesn't it look like something you would see in the Bahamas or something? Not what I would have expected to see out here. There's some bear tracks right along the beach. We didn't stay long here as we didn't really want to interfere with any bears that were in the area. Back in the boat, got just a little bit more time, maybe a couple more bears before we end the day. Experiences like this are why I travel. I never thought I would visit somewhere like Lake Clark National Park, and then once I got there, I couldn't even fathom how unique it was and how this was just an incredibly tiny part of this massive national park. The amount of remote places that Alaska has to offer are second to none. It wasn't long before we were cruising along the shoreline and saw a few more bears. We watched these last bears for 15 to 20 minutes before we started the slow boat ride back to the lodge. We were out on the water for every bit of 6 hours, and it was definitely a long day, but it was one of those ones I will never forget. By the time we got back to the lodge, our float plane had already landed and was waiting for us. All right, what did you think about our experience?
Oh my goodness. Hard to describe because it was so freaking amazing. Lots and lots of bears, gorgeous, gorgeous glaciers and mountains, crystal clear blue-green water. It's just over the top.
Yeah, my mom said that she thinks this area is more beautiful than Yosemite even is. So that's some pretty high praise.
For sure.
All that's left is to get on the plane and head back to Anchorage.
I'm excited. This is my 6th plane and my first time being the co-pilot.
I just kept asking questions on the way there, so on the way back they're like, hey, do you want to just sit up in the top so you can talk to the pilot the entire time? Which is basically what I did. As we took off over the blue turquoise waters of Crescent Lake, I could not fathom how amazing this experience was. Our pilot even flew us through a valley on the way back so we could get a different view of Lake Clark National Park before we went out over the water. The way back was a little bit hazy, but it was still stunning to see Cook Inlet, the Turnagain Arm, and some of these places I had seen from the ground. Eventually we made it back to Anchorage proper, flew back over the airport, and then made a turn in order to land in the floatplane base. This was such a cool experience, and I can't believe how Alaska relies on these types of planes to get to all of these remote areas. As you can no doubt tell, this is one of those experiences I will never forget, and even though it was only a day, I would already love to go back and explore a different part of Lake Clark. It's super remote and difficult to see, but it's definitely a beautiful place.
Made it back. That was awesome.
And just like that, our Lake Clark adventure is over. I thought that was amazing. What'd you think?
Oh yeah, wish it could have lasted a couple days. It was super, super cool. So do it if you can.
It's a pricey one, but it's definitely worth it. We'll see you on the next adventure.